Hello, Jason. How are you doing today?
I'm doing so great. Thank you for having me.
Welcome to Relationship Lab podcast. It's my humble pleasure to have you on our show. Before we proceed, Jason, do you have a favorite quote, something that motivates or inspires you would like to share with our audience?
Yeah, I can tell you one right now in my life is became a father again at nearly 44 and a half years old. So one of my goals in life is to do everything I can be to become a grandfather. So a
Hmm.
lot of my health and wellness is oriented to really taking care of my body now. So as an older father, I can hopefully be around for grandkids.
There you go. I wish you good luck with that. I know this because I come from an Asian family, and in our culture, I think two generations before, everybody used to get married when they're like 19 or 20.
Yes,
And by 40, they were already expecting their grandkids.
that's right.
Great stuff. So Jason, I wanted to do something different today because, on our pod, we talk about modern relationships. So imagine you are in a room full of teenagers, just got out of university, right? They're all going through the huge societal pressure where, oh, we just finished the university, now we have tons of college student debt. But here we recently got a new job, we have relationship, but that aspect of relationship is troubling them at certain stages of their life because they have to go through all this kind of like practical world, and then they have their own personal space, right? And you're there in that room, and you've got a mic, you're on the stage. What part of your story you would share with them that they will perceive you like somebody whom they can go and talk about their modern relationship challenges?
Yeah, I would say I think mine's a pretty common story in that I didn't really have a good model for what a healthy, intimate relationship looked like. My
Mm,
parents were more from a generation who kind of just got married and worked and had kids and hoped for the best. And there was a time that that was enough,
mm,
the way different cultures were set up. But that time has more or less passed, as we've now seen kind of skyrocketing divorce rates around the world and whatnot, and more challenges, particularly with um, younger generations, even being able to connect. The stats are pretty crazy in terms of how many people have never even approached someone they're interested in to ask them out on a date. And
mm,
so we just haven't been taught. I wasn't taught the tools for how to have a good intimate relationship, how to have a good healthy relationship with my sexuality, how to communicate and create emotional connection in a relationship, and what the tools for actually doing that are, right? In the kind of Disneyfied world that myself and even younger generations grew up in, right? The story ends and then they lived happily ever after.
mm.
Which the reality of relationships is whether it's you get committed and move in with each other or get married, that's when it really only just starts. The hard work of relationship usually begins a year to 3 years in when there's that transition from the so-called honeymoon phase to
Mm.
the, oh, this is the hard part phase where whatever parts of myself I haven't grown fully into and healed, including wounds I received as a child, like everyone does, not even big kind of trauma, but just the dysfunctions of my family relationship and my
Mm.
attachment to my parents, they're going to show up in your intimate relationship no matter what. And this is a thing that actually scares a lot of people and has them leave partnership when things start to get rough. But here's the deal. Whatever's showing up in your intimate relationship right now with this partner, it's going to probably show up in the next one
In
too.
the next,
And
yeah.
and so it's just that we get taught all these things in school about, what we need to thrive in the world, but relationships, inner growth and communication are not part of it. And so we now, thanks to platforms like this that you create, we have to go out and educate ourselves on, oh, wow, how do I handle my triggers? How do I talk about sex? How do I communicate and create connection and safety in my partnership long term? And
Mm.
My journey took me about 20 years to figure all that out. So I'm now particularly passionate about helping men in particular do the same.
Indeed, indeed. And thank you for sharing that because, it takes a lot of courage, first of all, for an individual to express that we haven't got that kind of support system around it when it should have been there. And we made mistakes, and from those mistakes, we have learned something which we would like to share, right? Um, and you're absolutely right. The current modern relationships have their own challenges. And as you touch on the point where people face challenges, issues, and then they just want to fall apart. It's quite easy nowadays because there's no societal dependency as it used to be in the, I don't know, 30 years back. Um, People are more independent, more free, they have more freedom. And that's why the decisions they are making, sometimes they could be reckless, but that's sometimes they're good for them because they realize that they don't want to proceed with the relationship. Continuing on the same path, I have a question then. Is falling out of love could be, or you think, in your opinion, is a good enough reason to leave? Commitments may demand endurance, but emotional disengagement can be deeply painful.
Yeah, there's definitely a time and place to leave a relationship, right? If safety is an issue, that's a
Mhm.
big one. If there's any kind of like, yeah, abuse, emotional, physical, sexual, yeah, get out.
Mm,
That's not a safe thing. Um, I think where a lot of people make mistakes these days is they didn't go all the way in and really give it everything they had. And, the work I do basically comes down to for a relationship to thrive these days, both partners have to be doing their healing and transformative work and taking responsibility for themselves, their triggers, and what they bring to the relationship independently. So they have to be
mm,
in therapy or coaching, getting education, whatever that might be. And then you also have to be willing to work together as a couple, going to couple sessions or therapy or coaching or programs or whatever. And if all of that is happening, there's a good shot to make it. If you
mm,
haven't really tried that yet, oftentimes you don't really know if it's the right relationship. And this is an edge, particularly for a lot of guys I work with, that the way to find out if it's time to get out is to actually commit and go all the way in. Say, you know what? I'm just going to go all the way in and try to figure this out. Now, if
mm,
you've both done that, done your best effort, you've been getting healing support, you've been getting coaching support, therapy support, counseling work. You've been working together, and still certain things just aren't working. What you
mm,
sometimes find is we're just not a right fit. We might care for each other a lot, have positive regard for each other, but our personalities or temperaments or values or lifestyles just aren't aligned. And
mm,
so we're going to exit consciously here. But that's very different than it doesn't feel good anymore, right? For
mm,
a lot of people, what they confuse falling out of love for is that transition from the honeymoon phase to the, ooh, it takes real work phase. Because any relationship, when we first meet, we're flooded with hormones. There's an actual biological process that makes it feel incredible. And we want to be around the person. But no matter who you are, that is going to wear off. And tensions are going to come. Fights are going to come. There's going to be moments you're not attracted to your partner. Now, that's different, though. That's different than what we're talking about, because at that point, what we transition to is really building and creating love, right? Where it's more something we stitch together, interaction by interaction. And so it's not necessarily as sexy and fun and magical, but it's where the real relationship gets built and thrives. So, I often say rather than, it's funny in our culture, we say falling in love, right? I fell in love,
mm,
which when you think about it, it's pretty crazy. It's falling is this sense of being completely disoriented, swept off
mm.
my feet. I have no control. And oftentimes that means it's mostly just the hormones or some of the wounding attracting to you. Whereas what I really believe is more creating the love, building the love, which is something that there's a core of it we start with, but then it's actually something we create over time through practice, rupture, repair, creating a culture of healthy safety with each other and strong communication. So just know that there is no perfect relationship, and any relationship is going to get hit hard spots. So the thing you really want to look for as someone in relationship is, well, am I with someone who's willing to work this challenging material, who's willing to take responsibility for it? If they are, I would give it a good whirl. And no matter what, you're going to learn a lot about yourself. And even if this isn't your forever partner, the skills and growth you do in that will
Mm,
directly impact the next person. For a lot of people, I think they need to get over the idea that relationships should always feel good and
mm,
instead get used to, okay, what I want is a partner who knows a good relationship is about growth and that we're going to have seasons of just awesomeness, feeling connected in love, but we're also going to have seasons, as I say, of crunchiness, of disconnection, of not feeling totally aligned. But
mm.
every couple's going to have to move through those seasons sometimes, just like sometimes we all got to go through winter.
Definitely, definitely. Do, so I think, should people view relationships as, I mean, and this question is coming purely because I speak with quite a lot of teenagers when I go to teach them. And these questions come along where sometimes I don't have answers for them. And that's why I make
Hmm.
a note in my mind and I try to get some inspiration and answers from experts like yourself. Do you think should people view relationships as partnership of mutual benefit rather than romanticizing the ideal of true love? Because most of the time when I speak with people who have been in long-term relationship, and when I'm talking long, 20, 25 years, multiple kids, when I talk to them, they're not holding hands, walking on the streets in London, or not everybody, but generally they're not buying flowers for the missus or the husband, or buying chocolates. Mostly, what they're doing is they're trying to spend their time together in silence. And when I speak with these people, I get the answer is like, when you don't sorry, not fell out, because we were talking about that
Hmm.
word that's not a good way to demonstrate. You feel love when you're around with someone and you don't have to talk to them. Yeah. So
Sure.
how do you differentiate this modern requirement of being in relationship for a mutual benefit compared to that, you know not saying that previous generation had this unconditional love, but there are some examples of it, that they're still together without sort of societal conditions.
Yeah, what I'd maybe speak to is all relationships need two things, and we can consider them two ends of a spectrum. On the
Mm,
one end, there's safety and intimacy, which is actually the process of us building trust with each other and kind of becoming one, right? We get to know each other, we share our lives more and more with each other to get where we get to the point where sometimes we can just be in the same space and not even have to talk, right? And that level of trust and intimacy and closeness is really important in
mm,
relationships. And that's what tends to grow over time. The longer a couple's together, you can finish each other's sentences. We've spent half of our lives together. I know the stories you're going to tell at the dinner party. All of
mm,
that different stuff, right? So we're actually more one. We are more one as a unit. But that needs to be matched with what we call polarity or erotic friction, right? Which is
mm,
the other part that not every relationship has to have, but most people do yearn for. And that is the art of what creates the attraction, that spark between us, the play, the energy, the sexual charge. And that comes not from sameness, that comes from being different, right? So that comes from playing with our differences. And you'll often see it even in long-term couples, right? Let's say one goes on a trip for 2 or 3 weeks. That person comes back. Suddenly there's more energy there. What were you doing? What was your trip like? I missed you. There's more erotic energy there. And the thing, again, that we're not really taught in our culture is that relationships start with a lot of erotic energy. Again, that's the hormonal flood we get when we first meet someone. They're totally different. We just want to be around them. We're compelled. We're attracted to them. Over time, though, that starts to dwindle and that level of sameness goes up. And the more same we are, the less attraction there is, quite
Mm,
honestly, because we're the same. I can't be attracted to something if it's me, in a sense. And so the art of long-term relationship is building safety and trust and intimacy over time, but then also learning the skills to, when we want to, know how to create that erotic friction and charge. And a good couple can do both long term. Most of our lives, we don't spend long term in that erotically charged place. We're just getting through life together, hanging
mm,
out. It's easy to be with each other. There's nice value, and there's something incredible about being able to share silent connection with someone. There's a different type of relational joy to that, really feeling safe with someone. And then we also want to have the capacity to, how do we keep it spicy? How do we keep it engaging? How do we keep growing in novelty? And that's where more of these skills of polarity and erotic friction come in of, okay, cool. My wife and I have to practice this sometimes. We've got two kids. We're both entrepreneurs. We do some work together. Sometimes we have to set time where we go out together, and our rules are no talking about kids and no talking about work. That can be pretty hard after 8 or 9 years. And
yep.
to talk in that way brings us back into that relational, dating each other kind of space. And that takes practice over time. And that's something I think, in particular, a lot of previous generations just didn't have. My parents didn't have it. And over time, they just became roommates.
Mm,
But we need both. We really need both. So it's okay to have those quiet moments, but we also want to have some fun and know how to create that charge in special moments as well. And every relationship has a certain dose it needs of that to keep it alive, to keep it engaging, to keep it thrilling. And these are skills and tools and capacities that we can learn these days. Again, we're not taught in school, and we have to kind
mm.
of go outside into worlds like this to start to discover.
Definitely, definitely. And thanks for sharing that, because these are the experiences which we need to communicate to our younger generation so that they can relate to it when they, follow the same footsteps. What suggestion do you, so let's consider most of the young generation relationships right now happening in metro cities, let's say, for example, in this case, where people are working 9 to 5, actually, in some cases, 9 to 7, 9 to 9. And then they come back home, as you said, they become roommates. They talk about the work, they talk about their finances. That's it. Intimacy is there, but let's say once weekend dish, and then alcohol. That's it. Nothing more coming, no more value is coming into their life in their in this current society, right? What would be your strategic advice to the young generation who either are got into a new relationship or been in a relationship for maybe 6 months or a year, so fairly new, still in their honeymoonish period, but obviously they're thinking to go more deeper, more serious. What would be your advice from a strategic point of view to learn and earn relationship points?
Yeah, what I would say is never stop dating each other, is one simple way to put that. And what I mean by that is, again, when we first start dating someone, our lives are separate. So when we come together, the purpose of that time is to put our attention on each other.
Mm,
What happens over time as we get deeper into relationship and commitment is we just start spending time with each other, where the point of that time is not to put our attention on each other. We're just
mm,
hanging out, we're doing stuff, we're working around the house, we're talking about finances, whatever it is. And a lot of life is going to be that. That's okay. But what we need to do is create the containers, the moments where we're still dating each other, where we get out of the house or whatever that, even in the house, and we put our attention on each other, of just that feeling of, hey, I'm here to be with you right now. That's where my curiosity and attention is. And so my wife and I, teach couples this. We call it relational time. It's,
mm,
you got to schedule, you literally have to put on the schedule, this is a time we're going to spend with each other. We're not going to be on our phones. We're not going to be talking about work. We're not going to be talking about kids. we're going to put our attention on each other. That can be
Mm,
out having adventures, that can be having deep conversations at home, but it's incredibly important to keep that going. And that's all going to be easier the better we're able to communicate with each other as well. Meaning, one thing I definitely work with men around is learning how to communicate and talk about things in the relationship, whether
mm,
that's tension, emotional issues and disconnection, vision for the future and what we're doing. We need to learn to lead these conversations as men to create this connection, right? To kind of shore up the relationship long term. But that's basically it. You got to keep dating each other. And the, it's in some sense bringing the same spark and curiosity to someone on your 50th wedding anniversary as your fifth date. And that takes practice of how do we actually do that. But it's
mm,
one of the great joys as we get into long-term relationship as well of, oh, it doesn't have to fizzle away. This story that if you stay with someone, it has to go dead or boring or numb. No, that's just because most of us don't know the tools for how to create that spark and keep it alive long term. But if you're in that kind of newer relationship and you're moving along, keep planning novel things with each other, whether
mm,
that's activities, creating things. There's tons of research that just learning something new together as a couple is one of the
mm.
best things you can do for the relationship. Take an art class, go to some program. There's so many fun things you can do, particularly this day and age, right? With all the experiences that are available to us, or go to a relationship class, right? There's lots of stuff like that too, where you can learn even more tools for how to create deep connection with each other.
Definitely, definitely. And one particular example comes to my mind is I was sitting with my friend in a bar the other day, for this conversation. Let's call him Raul. His name's something else. I didn't got an
Hmm.
approval from him to mention his name on the show. But in Raul's case, Raul is a young gentleman, 30 years old, very successful, lives in London. His girlfriend lives in Canary Wharf, so they live in two different places, and they're thinking to move in together. And the reason
Okay.
they're thinking to move in together is because they spent quite a lot of time at Raul's place. And Raul was saying me, Ash, you know what? Should I actually move in with her or I shouldn't? I said, okay, I am not the right person to tell you that because that question should be answered from within yourself. But let me ask you something. When you're at your place, have you experienced something like when you wanted to chat, you used your phone, right? You messaged each other on WhatsApp or Instagram or something, and you communicated that way. And he said that, yeah, we all the time,
Hmm.
if I'm playing my game or she's watching TV, I'm cooking something, and, I just text her and then she texts back. Even though houses are in London quite small. I mean, it's not
Sure.
compared to close what we have in US. It's very small. It's super expensive. Not like Japan, but it's very small. And then I asked him, okay, why is the reason? What's the reason if you're in a flat? I know you have a two-bed flat. It's not a big flat. Why can't you just go to the dining room and ask the person? I said, just my habit. The social media and the mobile has,
Hmm.
you know, trumped us so much that it's just in our habit. And we kind of actually faced quite a lot of we had quite a lot of argument around it. For example, oh, why I am following this girl on Instagram, or why I'm messaging this person, because we kind of like after a year started sharing what we are following. She doesn't have
Hmm.
my password for my phone. She doesn't have my password for my Instagram. But let's say if I'm sitting on a sofa and I'm chatting, she has this complete authority or affirmation from my side that she can look into my screen and see whom I'm talking with or having the conversation. This kind of gave me the idea that it might not be suitable for them to move in. But in your opinion, what could be the right way to figure out to move in together? Is this the right time or not?
Yeah, I mean, it really just depends on do you feel like you want to go deeper?
Mm.
with your partner. Um, and that, moving in with each other is a way to build quite a bit of deep intimacy and really spend a lot more time with each other. And again, it's going to challenge your relationship in new ways because you're going to have to figure out, what boundaries do I need to set? Where do I get triggered living with someone? And what's it really like to be around this person? This is, the moving in phase is often where we have to let go of the romantic ideal. Again, when we're dating someone, we're seeing them in a heightened space. So we're both leaving kind of our normal life, getting dressed up, going into this special environment. The second you move in with someone, guess what? You're going to see them on Saturday morning when they haven't showered.
Yep.
You're going to see their dirty laundry. You're going to see how they deal with their dishes. You're going to get to see inside that person in a whole different way. Now, that
Mm.
can shatter certain illusions about that person, but it's also where you can become deeply intimate with who they really are below the facade that so many people often put up just for dating. And there's no right time to do that in terms of like a checklist or something. It's more, wow, I feel I want to go deeper with this person
Mm.
and I want to spend more time with them and I want to share more of my life with them. And that takes
So, so,
trust,
so let
right?
me ask you this then. When do you know that you want to go deeper with this person in a relationship?
Yeah, you gotta pause and ask yourself, wow, is there something here that feels special to me? That means
Mm.
I want to invest more energy in here because I can tell it's going to take me somewhere in my growth and development and in my life that I wouldn't be able to get to alone. That's really kind of one of the main things is, a relationship should add something to your life that you can't quite get to alone. And that's a special thing. And for a lot of people, it's not necessarily a checklist, but it is an intuitive thing of, wow, I can feel being in this relationship is going to grow me in a way that I wouldn't grow otherwise, at least in the work I do, right? Some people, yeah, they're going to make a calculation and it's going to be more transactional. Hey, well, if we moved in together, we could save this amount of money on rent. That's fine. That happens
Yeah.
out there. That's not really the type of work I specialize in or help people around. Instead, I really focus on, again, relationship is probably the most powerful vehicle for growth we have as human beings. And so at some point, we start spending enough time with someone and we get a sense, wow, there's growth for me here. There's something special here that I've cultivated with this person and I want to explore it. So it's kind
Mm.
of the same as, if you were walking out on a hike and you came up to a trail and you're like, well, I could go this way or this way. Which one feels like it would just be more exciting, more growth inducing? Take me somewhere I've never been. That's kind of how you want to feel this in a
Mm.
sense. And
The, 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 the young generation right now have too much in access to the information that, you know, it it feels that, we used to say, oh, my gut feeling is that, and that's how we used to take decisions, I don't know, 20 years back. Now the gut feeling is not there anywhere. It's all about data. One of the
Mhm.
greatest example of what you just shared about, like, calculative mind, when Jeff Bezos, he was not dating someone, his friends used to come to him and ask, like, well, what kind of person you want to date? We would like to, hook you up with someone. And he's like, I want to date somebody who is so resourceful that if I fly to Iran and get arrested and they put me into the jail, this person
Mhm.
should be able to get me out of the jail and fly me back to US. That is the kind of person I wanted to date. And we know he got married to that lady who was very resourceful. They opened
Yeah.
the whole organization and they become $1 trillion company now, and biggest divorce in the last decade, as monetarily as possible we could look at it. But that's what his calculative mind was. He wanted to date somebody who was like that. On the other hand, you mentioned that it is not bad to think, like, okay, we move in together, this is going to be financially, this is the situation, because people are independent nowadays. They don't they're not that kind of like dependent on each other as they used to be 10,
Hmm.
15, 20 years back. I'm more interested in what you teach to people. What sort of exercises you ask them to do to figure out if the relationship is good or not? Let's go one step even, back. Instead of talking about should we move in together, is this relationship correct for me? What sort of exercise you advise?
Yeah, the number one thing I would say to look for is how do we handle rupture and repair? So, meaning what happens when we get into conflict or one of us hurts the other one? We have a disagreement, something goes wrong in the relationship. The number one thing to look for is how do you handle that as a couple, right? And a couple that has the capacity to repair, which means there was disconnection. I was mad at you. You were mad at me. I upset you, whatever it is. But we have the capacity to actually get present with each other, to not attack each other, to not name call each other, but to share our honest truth and feelings and what we need from each other and work with that. That is the thing. If you find a person who can work that, meaning again, like I mentioned before, is willing to take responsibility for their side, how they contributed. Most relationships, it's never just 100% one person's fault. It's almost
Mm,
always co-created. We each have a little piece we can take responsibility for. When you find a partner who does that, and who knows they have growth to do and there's things they're doing that contribute to the dysfunction in the relationship and they're willing to come to you and talk about it honestly, that is a great green flag. That is a sign, okay, this is somebody who it's really worth exploring here. Because again, like I said, every relationship is going to hit struggle and strife and pain. And
mm,
the more you're with someone who's forward, they don't just hold back their resentments or hurt, but bring them forward, don't attack you, are willing to honor your boundaries, and are willing to actually repair, which means I don't know how to do this right now, but I want to try to reestablish connection with you. And there's strategies you can go out and learn for that. But it's just that willingness. If you're with someone who never wants to talk about things or who always points the finger, it's your fault. You're always this, you always this, and never is willing to take responsibility for anything on their side, those would be red flags. And I would strongly encourage you to consider not moving forward with that person because you're going to kind of get into a lose-lose situation long term. So this is where, when you're in relationship with someone early on and you're deciding, what do we do now? Like, do I want to move in with them? Do I want to commit? Whatever it is, um, in some sense, you want to start having good fights. You want to go on trips and spend time with each other and get close and see what happens when your first conflicts really start to emerge. Because how you handle those conflicts, even if it's not perfectly, but there's a willingness to try something, that's really, really important. Because if you're with someone you can't handle conflict with, can't handle disconnection with, and that you can never repair with, for a lot of us, we didn't have that modeled in our family systems by our parents. It was like we get in people. I hear this all the time. My parents would get in a fight and they would just never talk about it again. It gets swept under the rug, or
mm.
someone would withdraw. That's what leads to an extreme pain over time in a relationship. So it's another way to think about it is can you have good fights with the person, meaning productive, connected, not being mean to each other, not name calling, but where you can both be really honest and you can maintain connection and come to repair with each other afterwards. If you can do that, go for it. Go all in and see what's possible. You can always exit the relationship later. But if you're fighting well with someone, that's actually an incredibly positive sign.
That's a very different take on finding out if you want to get into this relationship. I've never heard anybody mentioning this before on the show or even in real life. That's pretty good. Thanks, Jason. Thanks for that. I think this episode is going to be very helpful for people who are looking for some advice on this kind of, space. So,
Mhm.
Jason, as you know, like we could talk about modern relationship challenges for ours, but we are limited with time, and we also have to go through our lightning round, which is towards the end. So before we go to our lightning round, I would like to ask you a personal question then. Throughout your journey, there must have been valuable lessons learned, right? If you don't mind sharing, could you reflect on your experiences and tell us about one mistake or a setback that you encountered along and the way that you now consider it maybe not a regret but a lessons learned? And then additionally, what advice would you give our listeners based on this experience?
Yeah, I would say one of my biggest mistakes is I identify as a so-called nice guy, which is a term we hear a lot these days. And basically, what it means is, hey, I don't want to step on anyone's toes. I don't want to make my partner feel uncomfortable. And as a result, I often had a hard time setting boundaries in relationships, and I would become very resentful. I wouldn't
Mm,
actually share what was happening on my side emotionally, what I felt, where I was frustrated. I would withhold my anger, withhold my feelings. Very common for us men. We're fed the pretty awful platitude of happy wife equals happy life. So men just try to do whatever they can to, I mostly work with heterosexual couples, but keep their partners, their wives happy. And I tried to do that for a while and it just didn't work. I became resentful. I became withdrawn. I wasn't very present or honest in my relationship. And I had to learn the hard way that, hey, sometimes I need to set a boundary around this is okay for me or this isn't okay for me, or I want this, or I'm feeling this. And it might actually upset my partner in some sense, my wife. But over time, deeper trust was built between the two of us. So again, what I had to learn the hard way was my parents never communicated about anything. They had
mm,
no emotional connection with each other. So that was my model. And I tried that in my first couple of relationships, and lo and behold, it didn't work. My partner was unhappy. I was unhappy. And so I had to go out and learn the skills for how to be aware of what I was feeling in my body and in my heart and communicate that, and then
mm.
stay present with my partner when she did the same, when she communicated what she was feeling in her body and her heart. And those communication skills, of which, like I said, rupture and repair are a big part, they were hard earned for me, and it's still a work in progress. I haven't figured it out perfectly, right? My wife was on here. She could name all kinds of things in the last months or years, places where I dropped the ball or didn't communicate clearly. But she has a lot of grace for me, and I have a lot of grace for her that, hey, we both want this to keep getting better, and we're going to do our best to share our truth with each other. So, communication, once again, one of these tools that were just not taught in relationships that I never had modeled for me. I first tried to go through my relationships on autopilot and then it didn't work. And so I had to get really good at getting much better about sharing what was happening for me in an honest and vulnerable way.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I think one of the biggest challenge our young generation is facing right now is not understanding how important it is to learn to communicate with your partner. We know how to speak in public. We know how to handle uh, problems at the work. We know how to address a political issue on a social media platform. But when it comes to the communication with your partner, that's where we don't pay much attention, and that's where we lose the game of life. So
Mhm.
thank you for sharing that, Jason. So let's move into our lightning round. I've got six quick fire question for you. If you in case if you don't want to answer one of them, just give me a skip and then we will move to the next one. But I'm
Sure.
sure you will know all of them. So yeah, you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Great stuff. What are the top three rules to follow in relationship to be successful?
Learn how to fight well, get support for your own growth and healing. So get
Hmm.
in therapy or coaching, number two, and never stop dating each other. So make sure to have those times where you go out and you put your attention on each other.
Indeed, indeed. What book would you recommend to our audience and why?
I would say one of the most powerful relationship books is Getting the Love You Want by Gay and Katie Hendricks. Just again, some very nitty gritty tools for how to make this stuff work long term.
Thank you for that. What's one attribute or characteristic in your mind of a successful relationship?
that the thing I said about each partner is working on their own healing independently and getting the support they need, and you're coming together as a couple to do it. Because any long-term relationship, for it to work, there are going to be points where it's not what I want and it's not what you want, but it's what our relationship needs. So we both generously sometimes have to let go of our personal desire to serve the relationship. And when both partners are doing that generously, anything is possible.
Indeed. What's your favorite relationship hack?
Go towards tension. So the moment you notice there's tension in the relationship, there's
Mm.
hurt, there's withholding, go right towards it. So actually open up the conversation. Hey, I noticed I have a story. You're pretty mad at me right now. You haven't been talking to me or looking at me today. What's going on? That kind of directness, most of us are just never shown how to do or taught to do, but it can take something that might create a deep rupture of days, weeks, months, for some couples, years, and turn it around in a couple seconds. Because then you get both back on the same page and can talk honestly about what's actually happening right now.
That's a good one. What one secret weapon to keep your physical intimacy intact, in your opinion?
Yeah, spend time apart. So
Mm,
that's an
interesting.
interesting one, but it
Yeah.
means you have to have independent lives where you go out and do things for your own sake, your own pleasure, your own purpose, your own reward. And by having those separate lines, where I have my time to myself, my partner has her time to herself, it actually re-energizes things when we come back together.
Mm, very interesting. And that last but not least, what's an interesting or fun fact about you that most people don't know?
That's a great question. I'm totally obsessed with sharks. I love sharks ever since I was a little boy. I just grew up totally fascinated by them and could talk about sharks all day and just what incredible creatures they are and how cool they are. It's just one of those things that lights me up, just like I was a 5-year-old boy. Can still feel that energy anytime, and you wouldn't know it if you were just
Awesome.
walking by me on the street.
Awesome. That's great to know. If I have a short question next time, I'm going to ring you.
That's right.
Great. So, Jason, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your wisdom with our listeners. If people want to get in touch with you, people want to ask some questions if they have, what's the best way to do it?
Yeah, best way to keep up with me is to go to my website, evolutionary.men. I mostly have content on there for men, but a lot of it is focused around how to create thriving relationships. I also have stuff for couples under evolutionarycouples.us. There's actually a program on there you can go through with a partner, 12 epic dates that will turbocharge your connection and relationship and um, eroticism for each other.
So thank you so much. And would you be able to send me the link for it? I can put it into the show
Yeah,
notes later.
absolutely.
Okay, great. Jason, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your inspiring uh, world of journey to help other men and relationships and the impactful work you're doing through your service. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on Relationship
Yeah,
Lab podcast.
thank you so much. It was so fun to be here. Great questions.
Great stuff.